If you are in pain or injured from something that you're doing in the gym, this is the video that you need. Every man and their dog seems to have a new way to predict, minimize, or make injuries magically disappear. But sadly, a lot of the quackery that they're preaching doesn't end up working for people. And don't get me wrong, for some people, some weird stuff does work for them. If it tickles your pickle and you think it helps, it probably does. I'm not going to try and sit here and argue why something that did work for you shouldn't, because that helps no one. But what I want to talk about is that for the majority of people, shining a red light bulb on your knee and icing your balls probably isn't going to inexplicably solve or fix any problems that you have. Because in the quest of trying to stay pain-free or resolve an injury, you have to take a more zoomed out look. You can't just focus in on the part that hurts and try and fix the problem there, because that approach does not always work. You need to take into account the greater context of the individual, what sort of program they're following, and how they're completing the exercises in that program. As an industry and a community, we know very little about injuries. The word that you're always going to hear is multifactorial, which is kind of a collectively sciencey shrug and saying, we don't really know how to pinpoint what's going wrong in a lot of these instances. So many things contribute to them, from biological, social, and psychological aspects, that it can be really hard to go through a problem with a fine-tooth comb and pinpoint exactly what's going on. And taking all of those pieces into account is important, but since in this video I'm probably not going to be sitting you down and talking through why your parents separating has led to your knee pain.
People shouldn't ignore their emotions and avoid their problems.
What do you know? You're just a stupid fish.
Let's talk about the physical side. To add some categories straight off the bat, I want to break things down into acute and overuse-based issues. You can think of overuse issues like a worn-out piece of carpet. If you have a hallway that everyone's walking down in the same way in the same spot, that piece is going to wear out much quicker than whatever other carpet's in the house. Problems of overuse are a result of you applying too much stimulus to a given area, part, or movement pattern, and eventually exceeding that area's ability to manage that stress. Acute problems, as their name would suggest, are more acute. Say if you walked into a squat rack and turned your knee into pudding. Minimizing acute injuries is really hard, because outside of just saying apply common sense and try not to do anything dumb, some things just happen and they are unavoidable, which is hard to say, but injury prevention is really difficult. However, when it does come to overuse injuries, we can affect them a lot more easily within the greater context of our programming. And with these things, I'm talking about the chronic back, shoulder, or knee pain that pops up, or those random niggles that never seem to go away and you don't really know why. In my experience with pieces like this, it's load, volume management, and exercise selection that there is a disconnect or a breakdown. This is especially true when we consider that the average gym goer really only uses load as the metric to dictate whether or not something's hard or something's easy. There's generally very little variation in the challenges that people are putting their bodies and their systems through. This lack of variety makes it really easy to only progress in a narrow range, which makes it even easier to over-leverage certain tissues, positions, and certain exposures. And this leads to the eventual breakdown of either the weakest part of that chain or the part that's taking way too much of a toll. You can think about a low bar squat for an example. There's a certain amount of low bar squatting that will give everybody elbow pain. And look, everybody does have individual tolerances to certain positions or certain stimuli, but even the person with the most resilient shoulders and elbows in the world, there's a certain amount of that position that will put them in a very bad place. So how do we use better programming to help combat this and give people some other avenues to drive effort and stimulus down so they can stop beating the same dead horse that's providing them with all these overuse-based injuries? Well, we can first categorize a few different types of way that we can drive effort. There's 4 main ways that I want to break it down. The first one's the easiest one. You can challenge the system by applying more load, which is the piece that people seem to be really good at and really enjoy. Second, you can challenge the system by increasing the amount of either time under tension or the amount of volume that system has to deal with. Not necessarily at maximal loads, but taking whatever load that you're using to a point close enough to failure that effort is quite high. You can also leverage positions of real biomechanical disadvantage, things like gymnastics and other pieces where you're putting tissues in either lengthened or shortened or positions that they're not normally in that provide an inherent challenge within themselves. And then looking at anything powerful, anything that's constrained by how much output you can do in a really short window to elicit an action. And especially in those latter 3 categories, you can drive stimulus and output relatively independently of load, because there's other things that you can drive up, change, or shift to create more effort and more stimulus without having to just put more and more weight on the system. And these extra pieces can go a long way to becoming a circuit breaker to help continue driving some complementary or some useful skills or stimuli, whilst also complementing the goal or skill or sport that you're actually trying to progress, without having to pile more and more specific volume on top of yourself. Exploring things like sprinting, gymnastics, throwing, plyometrics, jumping, other powerful sports and skills can be really useful in driving these extra outputs, while still pushing improvements in things like body composition, strength, speed, and power. All things that you're trying to chase anyway, with the specific programming that you're doing. These goals aren't limited to a single modality. You can grow a bicep in more ways than a curl and get strong legs with more ways than a squat. We can use these complementary or varied skills to drive output without having to cross that line of maximum recoverable volume for some of these other skills or aspects of fitness. This makes things like load and volume management way easier because you now have more tools to shift that burden of training across. In my experience, driving more stimulus and challenge through these varied movement types does go a long way to minimizing those overuse injuries and just creating a more robust system that can deal with more. So spend some time trying to diversify your sessions, and by all means, keep the main thing the main thing. But if you're doing so much of that main thing that it's leaving you in a really bad place, you're racking up pain, you're racking up injuries, try a shift, see what these other modalities can do for you, and integrate them into your plan as injury prevention when it's really just creating better training. Anyway guys, I'll round it out there. Hopefully you found this video useful. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. I'm putting out new videos every week, and I'll talk to you next time.